Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January 21st Town Council meeting. I would like to remind everybody at this time to please silence your communication devices, cell phones, or others that you might have in your possession this evening. And I'd like to ask the clerk to call roll.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Stephen Leonardis.
Here. At this time, I'd like to invite Alexandra Fox up to join us to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And while she is coming up, I will say a few words about her. Alexandra Fox is a 10th grader at Los Gatos High School. She's the Chief Petty Officer in the Naval Sea Cadet Corps. Her favorite activities are attending the Sea Naval Cadet Corps military training throughout the United States during winter and summer breaks from school. Alexandra has volunteered over 100 hours in the past 2 years. She's responsible for the Operation Care and Comfort annual Halloween candy collection for the troops in Los Gatos for the past 2 years. In 2013, she collected more than 500 pounds of candy from the citizens of Los Gatos for the troops. Alexandra is very involved in Los Gatos High School sports. This year, Alexandra was on the varsity field hockey team and the lacrosse team. She played JV soccer in the 9th grade and was the JV MVP goalie of the league for the varsity in CCS. Alexandra is the youngest Chief Petty Officer in the 50-year history of the Moffett Squadron Naval Sea Cadet Corps, and only the 4th female ever to hold that position. Please join me in welcoming Alexandra Fox to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Alexandra. Next on our agenda this evening is we will be presenting some commendations to commissioners who have served the town of Los Gatos faithfully in the recent past, and they will be stepping down, moving on to other endeavors. I would like to invite down to join me at the podium this evening all those commissioners who are in attendance who will be receiving an award, and I will go through the names of those commissioners. On our Arts and Cultural Commission, we have Melissa Ann Warren and Marcy Reichen. On our Community and Senior Services Commission, we have Tony Blackstock. On our General Plan Committee, we have Joe Przinski. On our North 40 Specific Plan Advisory Committee, we have Bob Beyer, Barbara Cadillo, Charles Erickson, James Foley, Matthew Hudeas, Todd Jarvis, Tim Lundell, Dan Ross, Mariko Sayak, Barbara Spector, Deborah Weinstein, Gordon Yamade. On our Parks Commission, we have John Lambert. And on our Planning Commission, we have John Bourgeois. In our Transportation and Parking Commission, we have Melanie Hansen. If you can all join me up front, and I will present your accommodations to you, those who are in attendance. I'm going to read the text of what the accommodations say for one of the commissioners. Whereas Melissa Ann Warren served the town of Los Gatos as a member of the Arts and Culture Commission from January 2013 to December 2013. Whereas during this period, she unselfishly contributed her time, energies, and capabilities to the Arts and Cultural Commission. And whereas Miss Air Warren served for 1 year as a Arts and Cultural Commissioner, and whereas the town of Los Gatos feels that such outstanding public service deserves special recognition. Now, therefore, the town of Los Gatos, the town council of the town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation accommodation to Melissa Air Warren for dedicated public service to the town of Los Gatos and its residents. And they're all dated January 21st, 2014, signed by all of the town council members. So I will be giving those to those who are in attendance here. And Tony Blackstock is not with us. Joe Przinski. Thank you, Joe. Bob Byer. Charles Erickson. Thank you, Charles. James Foley. There you are. Thank you, Jim. Matthew Hudays is not here. Todd Jarvis. Thank you, Todd. Tim Lundell. Thank you, Tim. Mariko Sayak. Thank you, Mariko. Barbara Spector. Thank you, Barbara. Deborah Weinstein. Thank you, Deborah. John Lambert. John Bourgeois. There you are. Thank you, John. And Melanie Hansen. Thank you, Melanie. Please join me once again in applauding all these commissioners for their service to the town of Los Gatos. Next, we are going to honor, you guys can go ahead and take a seat and join the meeting. Next, we're going to try something new this year for our meetings. It is labeled Small Business, Big Applause. And the concept is to honor small businesses, the mom and pop types who are located in Los Gatos. And these are businesses who have been contributing to our community and serving our residents for many years, in some instances, decades. And essentially, we're just acknowledging them, their presence, and saying, thank you for choosing Los Gatos. Thank you for serving our residents. Thank you for remaining in business through tough times, through good and bad, and choosing to stay with us because we know you have other choices out there. And the first one to be honored this year is Robertson Publishing. And Robertson Publishing was also known as Pro Color in the recent past. I'd like to invite the owners to come up and join me here at the podium. Again, we're going to present them with accommodation, but I want to say a few words about Robertson Publishing and Pro Color. A few years ago during the Great Recession, they were inspired by a movie they saw on television. They got that inspiration from the movie Meet John Doe, starring Barbara Stanwyck and Gary Cooper. And in the movie, I'm not going to go into the whole details, but they saw somebody doing something randomly good for the community to help out others. And Robertson Publishing decided that they would help out local businesses in town by providing them with a free poster, the layout, the setup, the mock-up, a 2x3 poster to any business in town that wanted one for free, just to help them get their business name out there and have them be recognized during tough economic times, free of charge. And I thought that was quite remarkable to extend that invitation. This is a multi-generational business. It's been in Los Gatos since 1946. I'm going to read the accommodation, and I'm going to invite you to have a couple words. Whereas Robertson Publishing began serving customers in 2007 after branching off its sister company, 1-800-PRO-COLOR, Incorporated, a family-owned business that has been in Los Gatos since 1946. Whereas both Robertson Publishing and 1-800-PRO-COLOR, Incorporated continue to operate and serve customers from the same location as complementary businesses. Whereas Robertson Publishing assists authors in Los Gatos and across the country in manuscript preparation, book publishing, full distribution and fulfillment, and sends quarterly royalties to authors based on books sold. Whereas the 1-800-PRO-COLOR Incorporated side of the company offers local businesses free signs, gives discounts on printing service to nonprofits, offers design coaching when needed, and extends discounts to authors. Publishing with Robertson Publishing for promotional materials. Now, therefore, the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render the recognition of small business big applause with special appreciation and commendation to both Robertson Publishing and 1-800-PRO-COLOR Incorporated for years of dedicated service to the Los Gatos community. Let's have a big round of applause for Robertson Publishing and PRO-COLOR. Thank you so much for coming in, and I'd like to invite you to share a few words, if you'd like, about your business.
Okay. This is a little, we didn't know we were going to have to speak. But we've enjoyed helping people in this town and being part of the community. And Jonathan's been here for ever. Started as a young man, a young little boy with his dad.
And sister, my sister in the front row there.
And a sister here.
She was instrumental.
Right. But we've interacted with a lot of people in this community. The publishing side has helped over 40 local authors get their books out there. And Jonathan, what do you have to say? Anything?
Not very much. The business started a long time ago, and we keep moving and jumping and hopping and changing gears. And we started out as a sewing machine company, became an office equipment company. I have people call me up and ask me where they can get a typewriter ribbon. I do, or where they can get it fixed. You know, it just goes on. But anyway, we really, really appreciate this. We do.
It's nice to be, to be awarded or just say thank you for something. And we do our best to help everyone in town. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and thank you for continuing to serve our community for so many years. Another round of applause for Robertson Publishing. Next on our agenda this evening is our closed session report. Town Attorney?
There is no report tonight. There was no closed session before tonight's regular session.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to invite the audience to fill out speaker cards. We have more than two opportunities to speak, but we have opportunities to speak on any item not on the agenda, and then we have opportunities to speak on items that are on the agenda. So if you plan on speaking this evening, please fill out a speaker card and turn it into the clerk. Council Town Manager reports. Council matters. Does any member of council have anything to report this evening? Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week or the week before, I attended the Cities Association on behalf of Councilmember Brzezinski, who had double booked himself. And there was a really interesting presentation about Mid-Peninsula open space, its 40-year visioning process that it's going through, and also a report from the county on prison realignment, as well as some other items.
Thank you. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. This past week, the Vice Mayor and I had the first ad hoc committee meeting on planned developments.
Vice Mayor.
Last week I attended the VTA Policy Advisory Committee and was given presentations regarding available grants, which Los Gatos is not eligible for because we do not have priority development areas as required by ABAG and One Bay Area governments. And also a presentation on anticipated or hoped for toll lanes to alleviate some traffic issues on the highways around the area where either lanes would be designated or added in particular highways, and some of those lanes would be for pay.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
On December 18th, I attended the Metropolitan Transportation Commission meeting, and also on January 8th, the January Metropolitan Transportation Commission meeting. At that time, we discussed some of the things that the Vice Mayor indicated related to the awarding of monies and grants for One Bay Area, and also the question of the hot lanes that are proposed for Highway 85 and Highway 101. And then the January 9th Board of Directors meeting for the Valley Transportation Authority. And at that time, we outlined the 5 different projects VTA, the new VTA General Manager and CEO, Nuria Fernandez, has for the transportation enhancements to the valley that are proposed for this particular year.
Thank you. I also had the opportunity to attend the West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors meeting on January 8th, where we discussed general business. Next is our consent calendar. I'm sorry. Thank you. Next is manager matters. Yes. Town manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, 2 items to report. At your next regularly scheduled meeting on February 3rd, we will be having a brief Did You Know on single-use carry-out bags and the regulation of those in Silicon Valley and starting in Los Gatos on that same evening, February 3rd. Also, the town received an official communication today from the YWCA that I'd like to read to the council in part. The YWCA Silicon Valley is celebrating 30 years of honoring executive women. The YWCA Twin Awards have long been considered one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious awards, honoring both women who exemplify excellence in executive level positions and the organizations which employ them. This event also showcases empowered women while highlighting our honorees as role models as to what all young girls in Silicon Valley can aspire to become. This letter was addressed to former mayor, current councilwoman Barbara Spector, and it begins, "Congratulations on behalf of the YWCA Silicon Valley. I am pleased to inform you that you have been selected to receive a 2014 YWCA Silicon Valley Tribute to Women in Industry Award. You will be honored along with an exclusive group of other honorees. You were nominated by Diane McNutt for this award based on the outstanding achievements and critical contributions you made during your tenure as mayor." So I'd just like to share that with the full council. That concludes staff report.
Thank you. Now is our consent calendar. Does any member of council wish to pull a consent item? Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't wish to pull an item, but I will need to recuse on item number 3 since I own property close to the project area.
Thank you. Does any member of the public wish to pull a consent item? Seeing none, look to the council for a motion. Vice Mayor.
I would move approval of the consent calendar consisting of items 1 through 5 of our agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. I'd like to again remind those who are in attendance tonight, if you'd like to speak, please fill out speaker cards. We're going into our verbal communications. And we have 3 cards. The first is Erica Goss. Please come forward.
Hello, members of the council. I'm Erica Goss, your poet laureate, and I wanted to announce that I have a new show on KCAT TV. It's airing this week. We've already filmed 2 episodes, very exciting episodes, and it's called Word to Word, a show about poetry, and it's intended to be interesting, fun, educational, and it will spotlight local poetry and literary events that are happening in the South Bay and in the Greater Bay Area. So I believe that this week, every day at 9 a.m., the first show will be showing on KCAT. And if you have Comcast, you can watch it that way. Those shows will be rebroadcast on YouTube and other ways to watch them later. It will be a monthly show, and I hope that everybody will tune in and watch. And please send me your suggestions at ericagoss@comcast.net. Thank you so much for your support. This is a wonderful town to be your poet laureate for. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jeff Loffridge.
Hello, my name is Jeff Lockridge from Los Gatos. So the facts that I see them are big dollar, oh, hold on. I did get it in on time. Okay, so the facts that I see them are big dollar developers came into our town and presented a plan for the Albright land that was way beyond what our general plan allowed. And our town council approved it. Concerned citizens who had been watching this process and felt strongly that the town council had made a serious mistake had to step in and bring some common sense to the situation. Common sense and Judge Huber prevailed, and the big dollar developer was forced to get an EIR. Still, this big dollar developer again came back with a plan way beyond our general plan. The Planning Commission voted against recommending this new plan. The big dollar developer enlisted or hired the help of a local resident who rallied her school money fundraising troops based on misstatements of Netflix leaving and no money for schools. Concerned citizens argued that this new version was still way too tall and will also generate a huge volume of additional traffic for an already practically gridlocked part of town. Again, the town council ignored these concerns and approved the plan with a small compromise, again, way beyond our general plan. Concerned citizens once more stepped in to try and fix another town council mistake. The big dollar developer, in retaliation for having another delay, decided to again enlist the same local resident to front an initiative that will, if passed, give the developer much more than what even the town council approved. Modify the town's general plan in the process with no ability for the town to change it for 7 years. The big dollar developer took out several full-page, full-color ads in the local paper as well as a mailing campaign of high-gloss, full-color flyers to the town's residents. The big dollar developer hired an outside firm to gather signatures for a petition, using misstatements about Netflix leaving town and no money for schools as the main reasons residents should sign. Since most residents knew little or nothing about the Albright development, many signed, not really realizing what they were signing. How many would have signed if they knew that the only one benefiting from the initiative would be the big dollar developer? Sign the petition for more money for the schools in town, we were told. Another misstatement. Many of these signature gatherers, when asked, identified themselves as Netflix employees. Netflix did not hire them. The big dollar developer did. Presenting misstatements to the residents to get them to sign a petition that they do not fully understand shouldn't be the way we allow business to be conducted in our town. In fact, it's illegal. Is the town going to allow repeated misrepresentations about the Albright project? And how deep do these misrepresentations go? As one of many concerned citizens, I would ask that we start an investigation into the methods used to gather signatures for this big dollar developer's petition. You have questions, they have answers. We want the truth.
Thank you. Next up is Cecil Aniston. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I'm concerned about the administrative processes of the town, and I want them to work. And I'm concerned about the precedent that this ballot initiative would set if passed. Did people really understand what they were signing when they said, the signature gatherers said, to keep Netflix in Los Gatos was the purpose? Even Netflix felt that they had to respond. Netflix responded by putting an article in the local paper. Said, we love Los Gatos, we intend to stay here. What the petition gatherers didn't, or the signature gatherers didn't mention is that Netflix already has signed a 10-year lease with the developers, that they only need about half of the space of the 485,000 feet. They only need about half of that. The misrepresentation of the signature gatherers is a concern to me, especially if that proposal passes, that the town's process is circumvented and our general plan is affected by it. That's all.
Thank you. Next is Henry Fee.
Evening. I'd like to just talk a little bit about guns, but not about Templar. Guns in general, and that is that when we visit all the issues that this pending application has raised and find some kind of settlement to these issues, we shouldn't think of this as a fait accompli. We should think of it as the beginning of this town trying to do something to make our community a little bit safer. And the Californians took the initiative. The state legislature passed a number of safety gun regulations. Unfortunately, Governor Brown is looking at a future run for a second term and chose to veto the will of the people. I think that some of the issues that he vetoed would not be considered sacrosanct. We should visit those issues and consider passing them here. And at that time, I would also like us to review Measure C that the Sunnyvale City Council had the courage to move forward with, and which try to stop some of the end runs of the very powerful lobbying interests on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fee. That's our last speaker card for verbal communications. Moving on to public hearings. We have hazardous vegetation and weed abatement. And we're looking for a staff report provided by Matt Morley, our Parks and Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Matt.
You have the report, I think, in your packet. No further report from staff on this particular item.
Excuse me? I'm sorry.
I think we just need to open the hearing, allow for individuals to come forward if they need to.
Okay.
This item in particular is a weed abatement program that we have with the county to abate nuisance weeds. It follows an action that council took late last year.
Okay. Thank you. So, questions from council? Seeing none, any member of the public wish to speak on this item this evening? Please fill out a card. Seeing none coming forward, that concludes our staff presentation and public hearing. Looking to council for discussion or a motion on this. Vice Mayor.
I'd make a motion for approval of the weed abatement program as contained in Resolution 2013-050, Attachment 1 in the staff report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 7. Public hearing to consider a regulatory firearms dealer permit application for an existing firearms dealer, Templar Sports, pursuant to Chapter 14, Article 8 of the Town Code. Property location 611 University Avenue. Applicant Robert Chang. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, we do. Mr. Mayor, there is a desk item that's been submitted to the council with additional public comment and responses to council requests. And the staff report will be made by Director of Community Development Sandy Bailey and Police Chief Scott Seaman. And both the town attorney and I are available to respond to additional questions and comments as well.
Thank you.
Bailey?
Okay. On August 5th, 2013, Town Council adopted an ordinance to establish a new regulatory permit process for firearms seller in Los Gatos. Pursuant to this ordinance, a firearms dealer was required to file a regulatory firearms dealer permit application within 60 days after the effective date of the ordinance. The ordinance went into effect on September 5th, 2013. Therefore, Templar Sports is required to file an application no later than November 4th, 2013. A regulatory permit application for Templar Sports was filed on December 6th. This permit is required to be reviewed and investigated by the Director of Community Development and the Chief of Police, who would each provide a recommendation on whether or not the application could be approved. If the application is approved by Town Council, the permit is effective for 1 year from the date of approval. The permit is renewable in the same manner provided for issuance of the initial permit, which includes a public hearing. Pursuant to Town Code, the Director of Community Development is required to review the application to determine if the business meets all zoning requirements and any other rules, regulations, or policies of the town. As noted in Attachment 3 of your report, the Director of Community Development found that the application could be approved by council in that it met all current requirements of the town. As a reminder, Templar Sports is a non-conforming use and has until November 6, 2017 to either change its status to a conforming use or to cease their use. I will now turn the presentation over to Chief Seaman.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Scott Seaman, Police Chief. The police department's role complements the role of community development. Our responsibility is to look at a specific area and conduct an appropriate investigation based on that direction. That direction specifically is to determine if any of the applicant's employees or agents have been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor offense involving theft, dishonesty, violence, or moral turpitude, and whether the possession or sale of firearms by the applicant would constitute a violation of state or federal law. And those are essentially the guidelines that the California Department of Justice and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms use as their basis for determining whether or not a person can be a licensed federal firearms dealer or possess a certificate of eligibility by Department of Justice. We conducted a several-step process to conduct that investigation. The first is, I just want to acknowledge that state law carefully controls the release of criminal history information, and that's what's called for in the direction that the police department was given. We're not allowed to use our existing systems to do our own inquiry, so the established process is what the community and others may be familiar with called live scan, and that's a computerized fingerprint system that has a direct linkage to the California Department of Justice, and it's what's used to certify realtors and school teachers and people who are volunteering for community organizations to determine what their criminal history is. Those returns come back to us. They're vetted through the California Department of Justice and also the state's Bureau of Firearms. All of the individuals who are comprised in the application, that's 2 principals and 10 employees, were run through that system. And those returns came back. They came back incrementally, but we were able to actually expedite the process to meet today's deadline and get all returns in. In addition, that system scans for mental health history, and it's a delicate area of background investigation, but we were able to determine whether or not there were any issues that were present with regard to mental health databases. We also specifically contacted the Department of Justice at the state level and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to see if they had any adverse information about the business. And the reports from ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, were that there were none. The report was the same through DOJ, but upon our call to them, they initiated their own site inspection. And they did that this past Saturday. That item is specifically addressed in the desk item that you have before you. While they noted that there were very minor irregularities, they put that in the context of what they see across the state and did not see that that was unusual. In fact, they said that the business was well run. We did an internal records management system and computer-aided dispatch search, utilizing other databases as well, for calls for service at the business since the last date of application, and there were none. And we also conducted our own site visit. We did that last Friday. We confirmed the facility operates as depicted, and our focus was really on quality and process control and also the security system. And we determined that it has sufficient security measures in place for retail firearms. So on the basis of all of those investigations and against the criteria that council established in the ordinance, I recommend that the business license or the permit be issued. We also looked at one additional area because council has within the ordinance 14 areas specifically for denial of a permit. And some of those areas touch into information that the police department might see through our investigation because they deal with violations of the law. We looked at that. We did find that there was one instance relative to item 5E of that series of grounds for denial of the permit that relate to possession for sale, transportation, and use of a controlled substance as defined by the California Health and Safety Code. Marijuana is part of that. There's one employee who has a misdemeanor conviction for possession of less than an ounce of marijuana. On the basis, again, of the totality of our investigation, I find nothing that, from our perspective, precludes the issuance of a permit, and the police department recommends issuance of the permit.
Beyond the investigations and recommendations mandated by ordinance by the Director of Community Development and the Police Chief, as you've just heard, there are specific grounds for denial for the council to consider following a public hearing. And a public hearing is explicitly called for as part of the ordinance, and due notice was given for this public hearing above and beyond what was required by the ordinance. In the staff report, staff also provides information on those grounds for denial, discusses the indemnification agreement, the late application filing, the business license tax payment, and potential additional conditions of approval for council consideration beyond those that are specified by the ordinance. And as a reminder, any additional conditions of approval need to be determined by council to be reasonably related to the purpose and intent of the firearms section of the town code and public health, safety, and welfare. Today's desk item in more detail provided additional information regarding the application that has been redacted pursuant to confidentiality restrictions at the federal, state, and local level. It has provided additional detail on the conditions of approval and options for consideration of a penalty for the late permit filing. And then, as the chief mentioned, provided a brief update on the DOJ investigation last week, as well as two additional public comments. That concludes staff report. We can answer questions before you proceed to the public hearing or after.
Thank you. I'd like to look to council for questions, disclosures. Vice Mayor.
I have a couple questions. Can I ask? Go ahead.
Yes.
The first, Chief Seaman, thank you for your report. I was curious with respect to the DOJ investigation on January 19th. You indicated, and the report indicates, that there are what's being termed minor irregularities. Our permitting scheme looks at security, record keeping, setup of the business, et cetera. Can you tell me more specifically what those irregularities were? Because I'm not comforted to know that it's better than a lot of firearms dealers in California.
Thank you. The specific information that I received from the chief of the Department of Justice through the Division of Firearms said that there were minor regulatory violations, and its parentheses, did not get paperwork on a handgun safety certificate, no right thumbprint, released a few firearms without an approved firearm safety device. And his remarks to that were there was nothing out of the ordinary as compared to other firearms dealers around the state.
Thank you. The Los Gatos Police Department visited the site on January 15th. I'm assuming that there were other visits. The permitting process allows police to come in and inspect various records and documents or look at security throughout at any time they wish. I just want to know if that happened, other than January 15th.
We have not done other inspections. We have been in the business to follow up on just items of conversation or issues that have come up periodically between their dealings in the town around firearms. However, that was our first inspection this year, and we did do an inspection or site visit when they first opened.
And finally, Todd Fleming is still a member of the Los Gatos Police Department?
Yes, he is.
Thank you. And I have one question for Mr. Schultz. The application that you kindly provided for us, thank you, the redacted application, I should say, had a cover, what I'm going to call a cover memo, where the applicant indicated that they were acknowledging our permitting process but not conceding its legality. So my question is, where does that leave the council as we go through this process in determining the completeness or the effectiveness of what we're doing vis-a-vis an applicant who is not really indicating that they're subject to the process at all?
Certainly in regards to the application process, he has supplied us with an application and is here tonight to pursue that application. So from a legal standpoint, we should move forward with either approving or denying the application. That's that first issue, and he's here, and we're conducting the public hearing in that sense. Even if he had not raised that issue in his opening letter at any time, an applicant can always challenge the application of an ordinance in front of the council. The second issue, though, that I do take issue is with the indemnification language, where he's actually has to enter into a written agreement and is placing a reservation of rights on that, and that's a separate issue, one that I think that we do need to straighten out and make certain that's clear. But as to the application and whether he believes he needs to go through this process, he has submitted his application and he has submitted his fee.
Continue.
One final question. Since you brought up the indemnification, there is a suggestion regarding language to be added to what's been proposed by the applicant. And assuming I don't know what position the applicant is going to take, assuming that the applicant does not wish to change what's in front of us, can the council impose a condition requiring different language and then leave it to the applicant to decide whether to comply or not?
Yes.
Thank you.
Further questions from council? Seeing none, I'd like to take this time to open the public hearing and remind those who are going to be speaking on this item tonight to fill out a speaker card. When you come to speak, if you're tall, please pull the microphone high. If you're shorter, please pull the microphone lower. And you have a total of 3 minutes. The green light means go, the yellow light means you have about 30 seconds left, and the red light means stop, just like a traffic signal. Please come and tell us where you're from and what your name is, and be respectful. And thank you for considering that in advance. If you have items that you want to hand to the clerk to put on the overhead, please feel free to do so. I would like at this time to call the applicant forward to speak. You have 10 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Robert Chang, and I am one of the principals for Templar Sports. I want to take a moment to thank the council, mayor, vice mayor, town staff, chief of police, department staff, and town attorney, or attorneys at this point, for their efforts in regards to the process in working with Templar. We know this has not been simple, nor without passionate discussion. We hope we can continue to work with the town so that Templar will continue to operate in accordance to all local, state, and federal laws as it has over the past year. Templar here is tonight to complete the public hearing process regarding our application for our firearm dealer permit. We hope supporters, as well as those who do not agree with our business, will be cordial and respectful throughout this process. In the past, Templar was accused of selling gunpowder, automatic weapons that fire thousands of rounds per minute, assault weapons, destructive devices, and many other things that were flat out false and untruthful. We hope that the dialogue in this process is based on fairness, truth, the facts, and details that are being discussed in our firearm dealer permit application. Before this application process was enacted, Templar wants to remind everyone that we voluntarily provided substantially identical documents to the town and council in 2013. Fast forward 1 year in which we have been in operation in Los Gatos, and Templar has been a positive business member in the community. Even though we have been in business for only 12 months, Templar is engaged in retail sales in compliance with local, state, and federal laws, illustrated by positive full audits by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives and the California Department of Justice Bureau of Firearms. We have served thousands of customers, from the beginner target sports enthusiasts, families who wish to learn about fishing and angling, to the most experienced law enforcement officers. Templar Sports has donated thousands of dollars of product and services to local target sports groups and charities, as well as worked with the local Boy Scout troops in association to their Target Sports Merit Badge program. We have conducted hundreds of handgun safety certificate tests and compliance demonstrations, illustrating our commitment to educating the public in safe firearm handling. If it were not for some of the town zoning rules in regards to educational instruction, we would be conducting more expansive classes to ensure a safer community. We also conducted hundreds of private party transfers, PPTs, in accordance with state and federal law. A PPT is a lawful transfer of a firearm from one private individual to another, requiring a background check of the seller and buyer and a 10-day wait. Many of these laws were changed, and many of our new customers were unaware of these requirements, but Templar served as a community resource to execute these type of transactions. We would also like to address the issue indicated in the staff report in regards to the timing of our application. From the inception of the business, I have been the primary person overseeing the regulatory issues, permits, and licensing. At the time when the town passed the permit process, I took a leave of absence for personal family reasons. If anyone has ever had to deal with terminal illness of a friend or family member, I've been dealing with that for the last year with somebody. The permit process was delegated to our management team, and there was some misunderstanding and misinterpretation to when the application was due. In addition to the missteps we made, there were problems with the town's application process, which is totally understandable, as this was a new process to the town as well. For example, number one, the town code application did not specify how we were to submit fingerprints, a live scan, DOJ, or ATF cards. Number two, more importantly, a complete absence of any policy by the town in regards to what part of our application was confidential or public record or subject to a Public Records Act request. This is not a small matter because we do run a firearms business and sell ammunition. Security is a huge element to our business, our staff, and the community. In early 2013, we voluntarily submitted details that were supposed to be redacted, and they were released to the public. 1 day later, I received a death threat at my place of residence, and it was surmised that the person making the threat obtained my address through that release. Being a new process, we hope Templar and the town can work in a positive direction so that we can continue to operate at our current location. We're happy to answer any questions and do have our legal counsel, Don Kilmer, present for any details beyond my scope. Again, I thank you for your consideration, efforts, and time.
Thank you. Is there any questions from council? Vice Mayor?
Mr. Chang, your application was filed on December 6th. The problems that you recited with respect to the town and the confidentiality, those were discussed and determined after December 6th, correct?
Correct. Once I came back into the picture with the business because I was on leave, there was confusion because you guys were still having a town meeting about firearms dealers and land use regulations on October 7th. So it was our understanding that the way it is explained to us by town staff at one point, like the original ordinance, it would be read and then approved, and then there would be another 30 days reread, and that would be a 60-day element. Our belief was, or thought was, that since we didn't know what the regulations were going to be and they're part of this process, how can we apply to something and agree to it if you didn't have the regulations fully in place? So that was kind of the misunderstanding of my management staff in my leave of absence. They were looking at that thinking October 7th, which would be November 7th, December 7th. And that's why that was the misinterpretation of that, because they didn't want to agree to something that, like I said, was incomplete. It's like trying to get a business loan. You get your loan approved for the amount, but you don't know how long the loan is for or what the percentage rate is. And so they were likening it to that parallel.
One more question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chang, with respect to the proposed indemnity agreement that you offered to the town, are you amenable to any changes to that, your proposal?
I would have to ask Don Kilmer, my counsel. That's outside of my scope. That's why we.
Is he going to be making an independent presentation?
No.
Okay.
But we have been trying to work with the new town attorney in regards to that. We've been in constant communication since we've initiated this process with
Okay. It's a really specific question as to whether or not you'd be amenable to any changes to the proposed indemnification agreement that you submitted.
I think we would just have to look at what both counsel were in terms of what the changes are.
Don Kilmer, I guess it would depend upon what the changes you were proposing are. The reservation of rights that we inserted and the specific language with regard to federal preemption on the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, we think is pretty boilerplate, but we're happy to sit down with the town's attorneys and take a look at any new proposed language.
While Mr. Kilmer's still at the podium, Mr. Schultz, would it be appropriate to read him the language that was proposed to us and ask if that's acceptable?
The language proposed would be the exact same language that's in the code section, except it would reserve your right under the Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. So you'd be able to keep your last sentence or two in there, but you would not be able to change the wording of the indemnification clause where you've changed it from the operations of the business to basically only being the indemnification and hold harmless only deals with false information that's provided in the permit. And I believe, as we discussed, there are other cities that have used the same language that we have in our indemnification language. So it'd be the same indemnification language, but it would preserve your rights under the Lawful Commerce and Arms Act.
I guess the answer to that is going to be I'm going to have to confer with my clients. We're going to have a discussion subject to attorney-client privilege, and that'll be a business decision of my clients. But we're happy to, if that's the decision of the council, that they won't accept anything but this new language you're proposing, we'd like to see the entire new proposal in writing, and I promise to get back to you within 5 business days with an answer, yes or no.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, I'd like at this time to have the speakers who filled out a card come forward. First is Wayne Stobie. Lauren Liu.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Louie. I live in Morgan Hill. I've been to Templar Sports twice as a customer. I would just wanted to share from a customer perspective that when you, a lot of shops you go into, they're friendly, it's very safe, it's clean and lit, very nice. It's nice to go into a facility that is run very well. The employees are very knowledgeable, and My experience, I did make a purchase there, so there were some tax dollars left in the city of Los Gatos. But again, I just came to support the store. There's a lot of stores that go out of business, and they're kind of in a minority situation. So I would appeal to the town council to allow this business to thrive. And thank you for your time.
Next is Alexander Malcolm.
Good evening. I remember being genuinely surprised at hearing the news that the town of Los Gatos was fighting with Templar Sports, and that the people in this town were harassing a perfectly legal business. I had thought Los Gatos was better than that, and that their government in particular would be better than that. I've heard all about how people were harassing the customers going in and out of the store, and how some people even littered on the property. And then came the meetings, where people got up in front of you and with a straight face accused this business of furnishing firearms to children and illegally selling machine guns. It's particularly sad that people would act this way when anyone could have poked their head into the store and looked at what is quite literally a wall of federal, state, and local licenses, permits, and training certificates for this store and all of its employees. And it's just disappointing. I'd always thought Los Gatos was a little better than this, that if a business that they didn't fully understand opened its doors in their town, they would at least take a moment to learn a thing or two about it before condemning it and acting the way they have. It occurs to me that the only reason we are going on over a year of conflict over this topic is because this is a gun store, and your town is home to many people who live in ignorance of the gun culture in this state. We need to be clear on one thing. Templar Sports being in your town will have no impact whatsoever on public safety. So I'm here speaking to you all this evening in the hopes that you won't decide to retroactively require Templar to seek this permit. It seems like you'd be saying that you're all willing to embrace sort of a mob rule and disregard the rights of a business that bent over backwards to follow the rules as they were laid out, just because a few people had their political feathers ruffled. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Howie Spinner. Please refrain from applauding. Thank you. It makes the meeting go quicker and it gives everybody a chance to speak.
Good evening. My name's Howie Spinner. I live on Kennedy Road. I've been a Los Gatos resident for 25 years. I've been kind of following the Templar Sports thing, I don't know, word of mouth and in the Los Gatos Weekly and things like that. And tonight I wanted to come and speak. I'll try to keep this way less than 3 minutes. For starters, I'm not a gun owner. I have friends who are gun owners. I certainly respect them. They're very responsible people. They're business owners. They're family men and family women, very responsible. As a business owner myself for 28 years, I know how hard it is, especially in this economic environment, to keep a company going, keep payroll happening, and I think that Templar Sports should focus on their business, on their customers, on their payroll. You know, they're an employer, which is phenomenal. I like learning about the training and certification program. I know that when you increase the knowledge of somebody in a particular area, a child, a grown-up, that their responsibility comes up. Whoops, sorry about that. And that's what I think that's what we really want to achieve here, is we want to have people be more responsible with in all areas of their life. You know, we can get into alcohol if we want to, but this is about Templar Sports. So increased knowledge equals increased responsibility. And good job. Thank you.
Next speaker is Michael Glow.
With the exception of the last speaker, I believe the prior two speakers were not from Los Gatos. I'd like that taken into consideration. According to the new town audience, regulating firearms dealers, if a currently licensed business is found to be guilty of, and I'm not sure the right word, I haven't read the ordinance since it was published online over 2 months ago, but it was something like if they are found guilty of misrepresentation, fraud, or dishonesty, one of those adjectives, I believe, it would be grounds for not renewing that business license. I would like to submit for the consideration of the town council that Templar Sports is guilty of misrepresentation during their original business license application process. As proof of this allegation, I submit the fact that in state and federal applications, the permits or licenses being applied for were under the business names Templar Armory or Templar Armaments. However, for the town's paperwork, they chose the less threatening, less ominous name of Templar Sports. It is now apparent that a sporting goods store was never their intent. They are, and always intended to be, a gun shop. To try and pass themselves off as a sporting goods store is as ludicrous as calling themselves a women's accessory store just because they offer pink-colored guns for sale.
Please refrain from applauding. We have a lot of speakers this evening who would like to speak, and we would like to give everybody an opportunity to do so. The next up is Deborah Weinstein.
From Los Gatos. Dear Council, thank you for your support of our rights as a community to regulate where and under what oversight firearms and ammunition can be sold in Los Gatos. It's still unclear how the public will be involved in this process. I believe we were all expecting a little more than 2 business days to review the materials and a little more than 3 hours to review the redacted application. As the public hearing is part of a legal approval that's required now to sell firearms and ammunition in Los Gatos. It is for that reason that I request that you consider a continuation on this matter. In addition to this very limited time to review, the public was not given any substantial materials until 3 hours ago. How is that adequate oversight? Regarding specific conditions for approval, to maintain their federal firearms license, the applicant is required to uphold structural security on the premises where the firearms and ammunition are stored and sold. But how is it possible that there has been a broken window at 611 University Avenue for over 4 months? And is that a security breach? And why has that not been addressed? Why is that security concern not included in the report from the police department? Has the ATF been notified of that broken window? How does that affect the security of the firearms and ammunition being held in stock? And what is being done to address that? In addition, questions were raised this fall regarding oversight of weapon sales. How is it possible that a weapon was sold to an individual who had a restraining order? How is the oversight of future sales being handled, not only to protect town employees, but other community members? And on the lateness of the application, the town of Los Gatos has many examples of late applications actually being denied. Just ask any parent who has tried to get their child on a Los Gatos sports team after the application deadline. The policy is, in fact, no late applicants accepted, no exceptions. The point is it's the applicant's responsibility to know the deadline and submit materials according to that deadline. In many cases, a late application is in fact denied. At the very minimum, the applicant should be fined as a condition of approval as outlined in the staff report. Finally, I would urge you to continue this matter and provide the public more time and materials to actually perform a review. And if and when it is approved, to include the elements that are outlined in the conditions of approval in letter G of the staff report and many of those in attachment 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Jess Guy.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Council, Jess Guy, I'm from Los Gatos. About a year ago, we started talking about Templar. Some of the same arguments have arisen again that have already been discussed and passed on. But in the past 12 months, I haven't seen personally any major crime increase in the area. I haven't seen any major incidents, no neighborhood disasters around Templar at all. Realistically, there have been no violations of federal or state laws in the past 12 months. So the question is, what have we learned? We learned that town council wasn't satisfied with federal and state regulations that already existed, that the town council decided they were going to pass their own laws, somewhat muddled, if I may add. The time and expense to hold those hearings during the original cacophony of activity around Templar and all of its application processes took up a lot of town time, a lot of town effort, and a lot of town expense. The town passed a zoning ordinance which by 50 feet created a non-conforming status for Templar. 50 feet, that's, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but somehow in the back of my brain I have suspicions, just as I wonder who really broke that window. Now we have a yearly public meeting for a renewal, and we're going to have a yearly public meeting if it passes again every 12 months for the next 4 years until the 4 years are up. I don't know if it's really worth it for the town council to listen to people talk about the same type of materials that came up before. I don't know if the town council might consider some of these things a witch hunt. I certainly do. Finding Templar somehow as being responsible for any delays in the application, I think Mr. Chang pointed out quite clearly. There were a lot of things the town council had to learn as it moved along during this time also. It was a new process. There were no regulations in place. It took over 6 to 8 months for this council to come up with what few regulations it passed. So anything along these lines, I think, has to be taken into consideration. 2 department heads for this town have recommended approval for this renewal. I would hope the town council to listen to them and follow their suggestions. They've been there, they've looked at it, they know what they're talking about. Town council can resolve this issue, at least for the next 12 months, by approving the renewal, moving on, keeping an eye on the sporting goods store or the gun shop, whichever you want to call it, and think about more important things to this town. I think it's ironic that a night when the town council recognizes small business, we turn around and listen to a situation like this for another small business. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is James Reese.
Name is James Reese. I go by Jim. It's retired major, armor. Went to Fort Knox, and first 10 weeks was everything a lieutenant needs to know about being a tank platoon leader. Then 2 years, and then 19 active reserve. So I'm familiar with guns. I was on the Fort Knox rifle team for the second year. Every day I went out with an M14 to get better than I was the day before. And I did. I got pretty good. After high school and college rifle training in clubs and ROTC and so forth. So I'm a pro-gun guy. But again, just as ROTC was objected to by some of the students when I was going through, there was no requirement that you had to take ROTC. So there's no requirement that you have to buy a gun. So you don't want a gun, don't buy one. Yeah. So, you know, I'm trying to define where the political reality is. As a practical matter, the Constitution says thou shalt not infringe. However, actually, there's a reasonable structure. We do. We can't have an atomic bomb in everybody's garage. Nobody's allowed to have a machine gun. It's a fully automatic crew-serve weapon for the most part. So it's not shall a line be drawn. It's like where to draw the line. So, but I applaud the reasonableness which I see has generally prevailed here. There was an extensive report given by policeman who has a gun with him, just as he's supposed to. But evidently the process is exhaustive. I'm a foreigner from South San Jose, by the way. I'm not a Los Gatos citizen, but I learned of this proceedings and wanted to make my 2 cents worth. So my dad had to get a license to have a liquor store. They had to do a background investigation on him, be permitted to have a liquor store. So that process is appropriate. So there are certain things, but it seems like you've, generally speaking, done your homework, and the application and so forth, a couple of snags, but evidently it's new process, and so it's a joint measure. But I applaud your process. It seems to be a lot crisper and cleaner and just better than San Jose would beat this thing to death for months. So congratulations.
Our next speaker is Robert Kugler.
Council, my name is Robert Kugler. I'm here to support Templar Sports. As a business owner, a small business owner that started it with a very small fund and just a partner, and have seen it grow over a period of about 10 or 12 years to a reasonably sized business with 18 or 20 employees. I respect what is being done at Templar Sports and how difficult it is to maintain payroll and to grow your business, and the input that is on families and the families' input in towns. And this is a great opportunity for the council to approve this process and move on to other business. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Lisa Mammal.
Members of the council. The town council is the steward of the public's trust, the public's safety, and the public's money. It is in this role that the town council placed the condition for a firearms application to include an indemnification provision by the firearms dealer applicant for damages and liabilities that may arise out of the operation of the business. In essence, the operation of the firearms dealer should not put the town in jeopardy. Specifically, the town council requires a firearm applicant to, 1, fill out the form specifically designated for this purpose, and 2, to provide a written agreement to indemnify, defend, and hold harmless the town, its officers, agents, and employees from all claims, losses, costs, damages, and liabilities of any kind pursuant to the operation of the business. Simple enough. However, the applicant here has failed to provide such an indemnification. Indeed, he crosses out the required language in the permit application and offers up a statement instead. But the statement fails to provide a valid indemnification on the face of the writing. It fails in the spirit of the exercise as well. The applicant states in his January 13th letter to Ms. Bailey that it may be tentatively approved by the town attorney. I do hope that that is not the case. The so-called indemnity provision offered by the applicant undermines the first 2 sentences of anything that follows. It claims that it's offered under duress. The duress is of having the permit approved. This is no duress. If there were duress, then every requirement for a business to operate in this town would be duress. The requirement to have certain hours of operation or noise abatement would be a duress. On the contrary, the town has set forth manners and means by which such an establishment must apply to operate and continue to operate. Of note, such an indemnification requirement is part of dozens of cities in California regulating firearms dealers. The applicant has chosen his wording carefully because a claim of duress might be used to attempt to void a contract. That is, the applicant can attempt to rescind this indemnification agreement. And in that case, this so-called indemnification statement is not worth anything more than the paper on which it is photocopied. It is no comfort for a town, its safety, or its resources. Also, in the first sentence of the statement, the applicant reserves the right to challenge the legality of the ordinance. Therefore, the applicant attempts to state that on the one hand, it is fulfilling the condition and wants the license to operate, But on the other hand, the condition is illegal. The applicant's statement is a charade. It mocks the council and the ordinances. If the applicant wants to operate in the town, it has clear conditions by which must operate. The conditions were discussed by a special task force, vetted in public, and adopted by the full council and printed as ordinances. Yet in less than a few months, the applicant is failing to abide by such ordinances and mocks the very one that is to protect this town and its resources. The applicant fails to fulfill the application on time, it fails to fulfill the application using the form, and it fails to provide the indemnification. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Sandy Decker.
Good evening, Council. Sandy Decker, Glenridge Avenue. An amazing number of people stood up last year and asked for the town's protection against the only store in town that sells a product designed to kill. We all work diligently, creating a firearms dealer's regulatory permitting process, and tonight is our first test. I'm afraid I'm going to have to look to a continuance because I have many questions. With respect to Scott Siemens and our wonderful police force, the permit process unfortunately loses credibility in this community because the investigative oversight falls under the purview of the police department, but one of the principal owners of Templar Armaments is an active duty Los Gatos policeman. And even if there is no actual conflict, there is at least the appearance of conflict, and I believe we were looking to ensure the most fair, transparent, and thorough review of the permitting process and the ongoing operations of Templar. It's my understanding that council will have overriding authority over the police department, but who does the investigating? We were told by Mr. Chang initially that Templar would be more than willing to supply arms and training to our police department. Although the chief said that wouldn't happen, it's not included in this particular ordinance, and I feel it should be as guidance for the future. I believe the public should also know what the security measures for this business are, and how they are going to be used and how they will be inspected. Who oversees this? Basically, we need a continuance, if for no other reason than to give the public the opportunity to go through the voluminous desk item that was prepared for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Helga McHugh.
Hi, I'm here on behalf of both Los Gatos families in general and also Los Gatos Ballet. Los Gatos Ballet resides across the street and a few doors down. And we drive by as older, younger ballerinas, well, older, they're there every day. We drive by it almost on a daily basis. The window has been broken for months. These girls are between 14 to 16. They see the broken window of the Templar Sports. They're extremely concerned. Their safety, they feel at risk. The ballet studio feels at risk. We have male professional dancers that are their teachers. Some of them blend in, some of them stand out. They feel like targets. So we desperately behoove you to at least address the broken window, because the broken window makes all of the students, we have ballerinas from 4 years old to 20-year-olds. We have professional ballerinas that come to teach. We need to consider that we need to keep Los Gatos Ballet in our town. It's a high generating. It generates a lot of tax revenue because we pay high prices to go to Los Gatos Ballet. Also, the proximity to trail is, I think, also out of the range, because I think the range of 500 feet it's close. You cross the street, you go down, and the proximity to the trail, which is a public park, is within the range as well. So we behoove you to consider not renewing the license. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Julie Maya.
I'm Julie Maya. I've lived in Los Gatos for 24 years. And I am speaking to the council because I would urge you to stop negotiating with Templar Armaments over the indemnification clause. The town council did its due diligence in drafting that indemnification, in drafting the entire ordinance. And for a business to at this point in the process, try to change the ordinance seems totally unfair to the citizens of Los Gatos who depend on you to have done your job when you wrote the ordinance. Lisa Mammal has spoken about how the indemnification clause is completely in accord with clauses that are used throughout the state by other municipalities. Templar Armaments has threatened to sue the town in 3.5 years. There's a videotape that you can watch online if you want to see this threat. In spite of the council's conciliatory decision to grant Templar Armaments 4 years to remain as a non-conforming business, I don't think that negotiating with this particular business is going to result in anything positive for the citizens of Los Gatos. And finally, I believe that we're all aware that the National Rifle Association is suing the city of Sunnyvale because 66% of the voting citizens voted to enact reasonable gun control measures. We cannot allow this Templar Armaments to threaten the town with a suit by putting language into the indemnification that allows them to do that. Why should we allow a business that is threatening to sue the town? Why should we allow it to, why should we grant that business a renewal of its license? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Dr. Lois Morrison Keffer.
Good evening, Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I hadn't intended to speak, but I feel that I can't not tonight. I live at 504 University, which puts me in very close proximity to Templar Sports. I have not come to meetings earlier. Like Mr. Chang, I have a terminally ill family member, which has been time-consuming, and other, we all have busy lives. So I have not come. Tonight I wanted to come and hear what's going on. I'm also a small business owner in Los Gatos. I'm a clinical psychologist. I have an office right across the street on Church Street, and I love this town. I feel very strongly for the quality of the life in this town, for the safety of this town. My son graduated last year. I think it's a wonderful town for families and for children, which is why I moved here 14 years ago. I don't have anything against guns per se. I know sane, reasonable people who own guns, and that's okay with me. What's not okay with me, my point of argument, is that whenever there's a restaurant asking for a liquor license within reasonable distance of my home, I get a notice that I can come to a meeting and talk about it. If someone's doing major development or remodeling, I see orange tape, I get notices. I'm invited to come and share my perspective. Nothing like that happened with this. This didn't feel clean. This felt very sneaky. We could conjecture why. It doesn't really matter. I feel like the town of Los Gatos made a big mistake in not inviting the citizens to be involved early. I believe they didn't because they know how people would react, and the answer would have been no. We don't want a gun shop this close to families. I live next door to a family with 2 small children. There are many families in this neighborhood. I'm sure within 500 feet of the gun shop. There's a school nearby. We all know this. This is not news to anyone. I don't think it's a good location for a building that sells guns. And I do resent the fact that the public was not made aware of this. So I would urge you to say no to the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Wayne Stobie.
Hello, my name's Wayne. Hello, my name's Wayne. Live up on Summit. First off, I'd like to say that Templar Sports, which is a sport, also a way to feed a family, deserves the right to the pursuit of happiness and to, run a business, support employees.
Mr. Stobie, we're having difficulty hearing you.
I'm sorry.
Speak to the microphone. Thank you.
Pardon me. Okay. Also, the statement that guns kill that I heard earlier, so do cars, so do cheeseburgers. We shouldn't ban those, right? Personally, I think the country would be better off if firearms were never invented, but it is too late. Criminals have them just as much as law-abiding citizens. And like the officer mentioned before, LiveScan is a great program that does great things to keep guns out of criminals' hands, but there is a ton of firearms on the streets. You can walk, you can go pretty much anywhere to find a weapon. And California does have the most strict firearm rules. As an example, like the medical marijuana rule against firearms is pretty ridiculous, considering you can be drunk and own a firearm. You can have prescription opiates, basically heroin, Adderall is amphetamine, and that's perfectly legal. So I support Templar Sports.
Thank you. Next speaker is Linda Swerberg.
Hi, my name is Linda Swenberg, and I am a resident and parent in Los Gatos. I don't represent the families of Los Gatos. I represent myself, and I represent my family, and I resent anybody else coming up and saying that they represent all the families of Los Gatos when they clearly do not represent me. I feel that Templar Sports is an exemplary business in Los Gatos. They carry products and goods that we cannot get anywhere else in Los Gatos. We have to go, and they're not all guns. We have to go for those products to other towns, to seedy areas of other towns, where I'm telling you, the employees of those businesses have openly cursed in front of me, a married woman, even with my children by my side. I'm very, very uncomfortable with that. Templar Sports, in contrast, is a clean place with employees that are respectful, and I don't feel that I'm treated any differently as a woman. They're not cursing in front of men. It's really a very good business and a great place to be. I want to point out that, there may be legal action in the future. And I'm not associated with Templar Sports, but I'm a citizen of this country as well as this town, and I follow law cases in the news, and it's my understanding, I just read today actually, that on January 7th of this year, a federal judge struck down the ban on the sale of firearms in the city of Chicago. It was a long-standing ban, and it has been struck down. So yes, you do need to keep an eye on that, and there may be cases in the future, and there may be questions of constitutionality in the future. I believe that the town's most important purpose is to protect the public safety of our citizens. Your time as a council and as a police department is limited. And the best resources have to be, including your time, have to be put towards things and opportunities that have the best chance of increasing public safety. I'm not sure that, not allowing Templar Sports to continue would do anything to promote public safety in this town. And then, let's see. Oh, I wanted to address the thing about dancers feeling at risk. My children are also dancers in this town. I think that the dance studio that they go to is actually closer to Templar Sports than Los Gatos Ballet. They don't feel, and they've been going to it since before Templar Sports opened. They don't feel any greater risk. I have to go now, but I said
Thank
what
you.
I have to say. Thank you.
Next speaker is Douglas Snyder.
My name is Doug Schneider. I own and run a small business. I have been made aware of a Templar situation on the radio. I've heard the owner, I believe that gentleman sitting there, on the radio a couple times about 6 or 8 months ago. And he seemingly has jumped through every hoop and regulation and always has been calm, cool, and collected and most agreeable even to his critics. I'm no longer a Los Gatos resident, and I cannot quote chapter and verse of all the rules and regulations, but it looks like Templar is being targeted and put under a microscope. I'm sure if we looked into the city and its rules and regulations, as well as most other businesses here, I'm sure we can find outnesses galore. It just seems wrong to target him just because he sells a product that many people do not like. This business seems to be an unfair target. How many other businesses are put under this scrutiny on a yearly basis? I would say yes to this application. I would say yes to just leaving him alone unless he does something illegal.
Thank you. That is our last speaker on this topic, unless there are any other cards. Tim DeClaus.
Duclos, yes.
DeClaus.
I moved from San Jose 4 years ago because I wanted to be away from some of the elements in San Jose. One being strip clubs, which are legal. They operate there. I don't want them in Los Gatos. I don't want gun stores. I'm an ex-Marine, a current Marine, I guess. I had a rifle, M14. I learned to shoot it. I enjoyed it. But when we were through with the rifle range, the bullets went back. They were locked up. I was active duty. There were no rifles to be had in the barracks because they could not trust a trained Marine to control himself in case there was an altercation in the barracks. So we had no access to rifles. I walked guard duty at night, Paris Island, without a cartridge or bullet in a gun. So I'm not anti-gun, but there are certain things that do not belong in a reasonable neighborhood. Strip clubs, I could go out and apply for a legal license to get a strip club, bring it into town, but I don't want strip clubs in a neighborhood. I want a nice, clean, safe environment to raise my children and my grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Shannon Suzik.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for a new year. Some same faces. Thankful that two of our Los Gatos boys that are at Purdue, that are friends of my son, were not one of the victims, was not the victim today, and sending prayers to the family there. Thankful for the ordinance language that everyone worked so hard for. My comments have changed dramatically since this morning with the large desk item uploaded at the very last minute with a highly redacted application that enlightens almost no one. The thoughts and concerns have not changed. And this is really not the venue for discussing about, I think, the business is in place. This is a reaction, and this is part of the process, is the renewal of the application that was not given due public notice last year. So a couple of things. The conflict of interest issue remains. We have a police chief who is extremely competent, but he is in charge of monitoring and overseeing one of his own employees. There's no stronger brotherhood. Let's don't kid ourselves. Okay, that's an issue. Mr. Chang said tonight that he had family matters and that's why the application was late. So a concern I think should be brought forward as to who is in charge of the business when he is not available. Is that someone making, let's just say press conferences where they're saying that they're following people around town? I don't know. No, and I repeat, no response to numerous requests that I have made personally and other people that I know in regards to internet licenses and applications and manufacturing licenses and applications. This is a huge issue across the country right now, internet sales. And it's a large amount of tax dollars. Who's overseeing this? Where is this in the language? It's a gap that needs to be filled. So I printed out one of the postings on Facebook. For those of you looking to build your own AR, and I'm just not that knowledgeable about guns, but I believe that's for an automatic rifle. They're providing these items. Now, what is it for? Okay. Well, then a couple of the other items that I set over there were I also, regardless, items are being posted and advertised on the internet through Facebook and through CalGuns, no longer on their website. Who's monitoring this? Where is our oversight there? So that, I think those are the 2 points, and the fact that such a large amount of information and inspections were done within the last 3 days. That's not sufficient time for the council, for the public to digest this information and make a competent decision. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last card. I would like to invite the applicant forward to, you have 5 minutes to add additional comments or thoughts to what the public.
Before I start speaking, I would like to try to get something put up on the board, but I don't want the entire document. I'd like to just address some of the concerns from the community members and address some of the elements that were spoken tonight. Number one of the reasons why a lot of this information is redacted is that in our security plan, we have some very specific implements in terms of hard physical plant security elements that if we discussed in public, the criminals and someone who would want to do nefarious business against our business would be able to penetrate our business and put the community at risk. So there's a reality here in terms of us disclosing our security elements, what kind of alarms we have, what type of bars we have, where our panic buttons are, where the cameras are positioned, where the mainframe, where the surveillance tapes are kept. Those are things that a bank does not disclose. Any other type of business does not disclose. It's a public safety issue. So I apologize if we can't just open our books and provide that. You have to have good faith in terms of the ATF, the Department of Justice of California, and the police department have fully inspected us, and we're fully compliant to those elements. So to say that it has not been inspected, it has been inspected 3 times or more, and we are more than compliant, and I just want to address that. In terms of our front window, you'll see we did have a crack, but I want to explain, and I'll discuss one part of the security element that I'm not comfortable in doing so, but I will to allay some of the community concerns. There is a crack on the exterior glass, but it's safety glass. It's triple laminate. It has high tensile stainless steel wire in it, and on the back end has high-grade steel bars that are more than what is required by state and federal law. So to penetrate this window, even though it looks cracked from the exterior, it is more than ample and supersedes anything that the state, local, or federal law requires. We went way above and beyond. So I just want to explain that the crack is on this front window. It costs about $5,000 to $8,000 just to replace that window because of the quality of it. And that's what we've put forward in terms of safety and security for our business. In terms of the other aspects, in terms of someone mentioned the restraining order and a firearm inappropriately released to a customer, we did not know at the time that the town had entered into a private agreement with the individual, so her information was not entered into the NICS program. So when we ran the background investigation, it did not appear. The town actually approached me, the police department, and asked me if I would personally contact the customer and see if she would return the firearm, because she had indicated to the police department she would not return the firearm. I actually was able to offer her a full refund and give her a refund not only for the firearm and the DROS fees, in which my company took a financial burden upon that, and the person actually returned the firearm. We were actually commended by the detectives and the police officers that engaged to us to help them in this matter. So to have any kind of element that we did something wrong doing in this transfer, it was the complete exact opposite when you look at the details. In terms of the tax implications or issues with internet sales, everything is ran through our POS system in accordance to state and federal tax laws. So nothing is done, even on Cal Guns, it's still ran in accordance to all federal, state, and local tax laws, as well compliant to all the firearm accessories and firearm laws in local, state, and federal laws. So there's no issue there. We were inspected. They look at that. They ask us about those type of sales. We show them how we do it. We show them where we are represented online, what we do on our Facebook. They review it, and they approve it. So there's no anything hidden from the public in terms of, or regards to that. So in addressing that, I just want to really say thank you for the discussion and for listening to us. We hope you approve our permit in accordance to what the Chief of Police and Director of Community Development has made in the recommendations. I think, Don, do you want to comment about the indemnification? We may have some basic conversation because there was some questions for the Vice Mayor.
I would like to review this again very briefly offline with the town's attorney, but I think that the wrong version or the wrong proposal that we proposed for the indemnification made it into the staff report, because the January 13th submission in attachment, I believe it was attachment 6, is a letter from Templar outlining the language that was initially proposed by the town, and then on the second page was our modification where the first several lines is our reservation of rights, and then there is a duplication of the indemnification agreement proposed by the town. We do also state that we believe this is under duress. It's not actually an agreement. Our point is that if you're going to pass an ordinance, pass the ordinance and we'll comply, okay, or we'll challenge it when it becomes challengeable. But the problem is that the original indemnification said that we had to agree to it. We were basically saying we weren't agreeing. If you're going to pass an ordinance, pass an ordinance. And then the second portion is that we reserve this right under the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. So if I'm understanding the Vice Mayor correctly, that would we agree to the language that was proposed by the town with our reservation of rights to challenge the ordinance and our reservation of rights under the Federal Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act? I think we do have an agreement. We just need to make sure that we don't misunderstand each other on this. But I think that I did notice that there was a difference in what we submitted on January 13th and what made it into the staff report that is before the town right now. It's different. That was an earlier version of what we had proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Kilmer. Your time is up. Are there any questions from council? Vice Mayor.
Mr. Kilmer, I'm sorry, do you have a copy of the desk item number 7 that was distributed this afternoon that has the redacted application?
No, I don't.
I'm just curious that the very last page, what we got, hopefully you're going to look at, is titled Indemnity / Hold Harmless Provision, and it's signed by Mr. Chang. My question is that the correct version of what you are proposing? For mine, it's the last. It could be the second to last.
I believe it's of the original staff report, or is it of the...
I'm looking at the application. I'm not looking at the staff report. So is the application the correct version, or is the staff report the correct version?
It's actually provided in both. To clarify for the council, it is provided in the desk item in the second to last page as part of the application. It was also provided in the staff report as attachment 4. So the same document was in both places.
So my question for you, Mr. Kilmer, is that the correct version of what you proposed?
This is what we had proposed, and this is what we're prepared to sign off on.
Okay. And to the extent that there is anything that changes in that, as I understood you earlier, you would want to review what that is and take at least 5 days to do that, correct?
Just 5 business days, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. So that we're all on the same page, this document to which I believe you and the Vice Mayor are making reference, it's dated January 13th, 2014.
That was our submission on January 13th, 2014. That's correct. And it was in the version that we submitted, it was attachment 6 of our supplemental submission, and that attachment 6 was a January 13th letter addressed to Sandy Bailey. The first paragraph says, the town of Los Gatos, your original language, my criticisms of that language, and then the last page is the full indemnity hold harmless that we would agree to.
All right, thank you. So we're, all, like I said, all on the same page. Mr. Chang, following up with you with regard to the broken window, correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, there is a crack in the window, but the window is a very strong, expensive window. In your assessment, the crack doesn't negate its ability to protect your store, and if you needed to repair it, it would cost $5,000 to $8,000, and that's something that you don't want to undertake. Is that right?
It is something we want to undertake. It's just we didn't know what the outcome of this whole process was going to be, and to invest that amount of money, if we're going to be denied the permit, then it would have been, DOJ was in last week. They saw it, saw how secure it was, and said that is fine. From from the outside view, maybe it doesn't look so great. So it's something we want to work with and resolve, obviously. Something
So
that, as any business owner, if there's something broken, we want to fix it.
So your thought would be that if you got the permit, then it would be something that you would repair?
Yes, because our business partners are making, hard decisions in terms of what direction this goes, and there's actually, people's jobs on the line here. There's a big financial outlay in terms of our business operations. So it is one of our global considerations as well.
Okay, and then an issue came up. You had said that you were outside, you were not in your store because you had family illnesses with which to deal. When you are not there, who is in charge of the store?
Well, we have 2 store managers that are allocated and designated to the ATF to report, like the DOJ and ATF come in and do inspections. They're actually manager employees, so they're held responsibility if I'm off site, as well as Todd Fleming if he's not in conflict of obviously working off the clock in an approved manner per the police department's secondary employment agreement and permission that he has from the town.
All right, so Officer Fleming would be doing some of the work, and as you described, who are the other two folks who would be doing your work when you're not there?
There are two managers that we were provided all the information on their backgrounds. They have certificates of eligibility, met all the confines of that.
I'm not concerned about, whether they're legal or not, but what are their names?
That was part of our redacted information in which the town redacted the names of those individuals
All right, so
for
hold
sake
on,
of security.
hold on just a minute. Is this something that is redacted information?
Yes, it is. Employees have been redacted. Certainly, the employer could waive that requirement, or the employee, but I don't think the city should require that.
Is the redaction of these two people who take Mr. Chang's place something that's legally required to be redacted? Am I misunderstanding something?
Yes, there's, under the government code, there's all sorts of requirements of documents that are confidential, and those would include personnel records or privacy information.
Including names?
And who their names.
All right, thank you. And lastly, I understand that you do have internet sales. Is that correct?
We have internet. What we have is a indication on our website of pricing and everything else. People cannot directly go onto our website and order. They need to call the store and see if it's available item, and then it's actually basically a person-to-person transaction in which we take all the information. Naturally, if it's a firearm, it's done in accordance to local, state, and federal law, where it's never sent to an individual's home or anything. It goes to a licensed dealer. That person receives it. They get a background check. It's nothing that is perceived that, oh, you can just buy a gun through email. You can't do that. It's illegal if you do so. So there again, when we were reviewed by the ATF and California Department of Justice, we explained to them the process, and we work to comply with that. They have chapters on their website as well as compliance elements in the law that kind of direct us in that. So that is another part of our compliance.
All right, thank you. No further questions right now.
Thank you.
I can address the issue of the internet sales a little bit better if you're interested.
No, actually, Mr. Chang answered it perfectly.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions from council? I have a question for Mr. Chang. Has your ownership changed? Originally, there were 3 owners, and on your permit application, I only see 2 owners listed.
No, I think in terms of the application process, and I know the town attorney worked with my counsel, under ATF rules, anyone who invests, not necessarily an owner, but invests into a company that entails firearm sales, has to be put on the FFL if it's more than 10% investment. The person that was originally on there, we just gave the chief of police that information because it wasn't necessarily that he was an owner. In regards to your application process, it was asking for information about actual ownership or managing members or the limited liability company, which we are. And with the documents that were provided to you from last year to this year, the only 2 managing members, as indicated, have not changed, which is myself and Todd Fleming.
So a follow-up question. The person who has, say, a 10% financial interest who was previously disclosed to council as one of the owners is not an owner anymore, or?
It's there again. It was a kind of a difficult play between the 2 councils because he's technically not an owner. He's an investor. So it's almost like if I went to a bank, they gave me a loan. That's a bank. So I wouldn't put the bank as an owner of my company. They're not a party to that. The only reason like I said, you had that information from last year was because it was on the federal firearms license and not on our limited liability documents.
Is that name also the name that's on the lease?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions from council? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Move on to discussion, comments, or motions from council.
Mr. Mayor, staff did want to clarify one point regarding public notice. As was stated in the staff report, notices were sent out to property owners and residents within 500 feet of Templar Sports, as is the normal process for community development with a conditional use permit process, and they determined and decided to apply that same standard to this regulatory permit process as well.
Thank you. I have a question for staff while we're on the subject of staff. We received an email from the town attorney, and it had a copy of the business license, which was issued 12/31/13 to Templar. And originally that business license that was provided was not signed by our town staff. And then subsequently, it looks like it is now currently signed. I was wondering whose signature on staff that was done by and when that was done. I have a copy of it here. It's the last page of the email that Mr. Schultz sent to council. It was in the email that you sent us. There are some of the redacted documents, yes. It's not part of the desk item.
Excuse me, this was the original business license issued for year 2013. As stated in the staff report, no business license for 2014 has been issued.
That is correct, yes. I just recall previously that there was no signature on the original license, and now on the copies that we received, there is a signature on there, and I don't know whose signature that is.
Yes, I would have to go back and review the town records. We obviously don't have access to do that tonight. This is now an expired license that's no longer in effect. And the 2014 license is what's pending per your hearing tonight or continued next week. We can certainly report back to the signature. I believe this signature was by the Director of Finance when the signature is not for the whole license. It's simply for the statement of valid for retail sales of firearms, which the council will recall was previously placed on the business license in 2012 for year 2013 pursuant to Department of Justice requirements that either the business license be noted by an officer, which in this case is the Director of Finance, as valid for retail sales of firearms, or as is now the town's practice, as previously disclosed to council, to follow the other process offered by DOJ, which is to send a letter to the Department of Justice that states whether or not the business is in compliance with local law. So this, we directed over a year ago, would never be done again with a change to our business license.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I might, a question or two of staff and then some thoughts. I'm going to apologize because you probably answered this verbally and in writing, but I get confused about what's redacted and what's not. With regard to the marijuana conviction of the employee, is that conviction less than 2 years old or more recent than 2 years?
Actually, your terminology is the same. However, this violation is more than 2 years old.
It's more than 2 years old. Now, given that it's more than 2 years old, does that have any impact on our consideration of the licensing on a local level here?
My recommendation didn't address the issue of whether it was within 2 years or more than 2 years old. I just looked at the nature of the violation against the criteria of the town, and in making my recommendation, it applies to a different element of whether or not that can be considered for employment.
Is staff making a recommendation on whether or not, assuming that somewhere along the way a permit is issued, whether or not the permit should be conditioned on a disallowance of employees with marijuana convictions.
Based on the information provided by the town attorney today, we would recommend that for the council's consideration of grounds for denial 5C, which is on page 4 of the staff, or excuse me, 5D, which is on page 4 of the staff report. And excuse me one more time, it's 5E. It's any offense involving the manufacture, sale, possession, that a condition could be added to the approval that says no employee shall be hired who has had a conviction for the possession of marijuana in the last 2 years. That would not apply to the one case that was identified previously by the chief, because that was greater than 2 years ago. But it would apply to any future employees who might be in that same circumstance.
What consideration, if any, has staff given to including in that prohibition an employee with a 2-year-old plus marijuana conviction?
I will defer to the town attorney.
What considerations, you mean the reasoning behind that? There's certain sections of the labor code that are concerning for me, and if you look at some of the new ordinances that are being drafted in that, they're taking those into consideration. And specifically under the labor code, an employee cannot consider as part of his employment a conviction for marijuana that includes less than an ounce and it is more than 2 years old. So if you go just by our ordinance, which does not have that exemption in there, and that this council makes a requirement that anyone with a conviction of of regular marijuana, then what the employer would have to do is would have to terminate that employee on that basis, and is subjecting him to violating the labor code, and also technically could be us violating the labor code. So labor code specifically has an exemption that we don't have in our code, and that's why we've recommended that you put that in there.
All right, thank you. Then, if I might, Mr. Mayor, don't have a motion, but just some thoughts, and definitely looking forward to hearing what the council has to say. It's really unfortunate, given the history of this application and of this business, that we're here tonight with an application that borders on being late. And I do understand that it came in on December 6th, which was 2 months or 60 days after October 7th. So I do understand that there might have been confusion, but it's unfortunate in this specific case that there was any confusion. Because once you get into that confusion, you get into the issues of can or should the permit be denied, and then you get into all of the issues associated with that. Or do you say, well, then we will approve the permit, but then you get into the issue of will we have a penalty, and if we have a penalty, how much will that be? These are all issues which I would anticipate we're going to be dealing with. But if I had my druthers, we wouldn't have to deal with them because everybody would have dotted their I's and crossed their T's. But that's not how it happened, and they will be things that we'll address, and I'm looking to hear what others have to say. One issue with that I am clear on for myself, and that's the indemnity language. I am very comfortable with having the applicant comply with the indemnity language that we, within the past year, have adopted within our ordinance. And I'm also comfortable with the conditions of approval that staff has placed on page 6 of our staff report. I am comfortable if we go forward with the permit of then issuing the business license, and those are all my thoughts so far.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to second what Councilwoman Spector has said. I have a full agreement with what she is indicating. I would also like to be more specific about the conditions of approval that she noted. That would be section 14.130.035, and this would be in the grounds for denial of permit. We did receive information from our attorney today indicating that there may be some language that needs clarification, and the recommendation, I believe, comes from two areas. That would be in that section. It would be at the end of 5. That would be 5C. Add except as permitted under state or federal law. Okay, and that relates to the, I believe that relates to the issue of a law enforcement officer having access to the weapon and the ammunition immediately upon sale, and that's by state law, correct? Would you want to clarify that, Mr. Manager?
And Mr. Brzezinski, just for the benefit of the audience and the rest of council, I believe you're referring to the proposed conditions of approval, which are Exhibit A of Attachment 6 to the original staff report, and you're referencing 5C and folding in the recommended conditions of approval from staff in the staff report on page 6.
That's correct. Okay. Also, there's a reference to the question of the suspension relative to the use of a controlled substance, and that new language is proposed. It's a result of a Pleasant Hills suit. Would you talk to that issue, Mr. Attorney?
Sure. I briefly discussed that earlier, and that's our language that you'll find in many of the ordinances which deal with the ability to deny a permit if there is a conviction for the possession of marijuana, and the issue that comes in direct conflict with the labor code, which says that a conviction of marijuana that's over 2 years old and less than 1 ounce cannot be used against you or discriminate you in your employment. And so the way to rectify those two is to add the new condition as number 10. That would be a conviction pursuant to Labor Code Section 432.7 and 403.28. The requirements set forth in Section 14.130.035.5E shall not apply to any conviction for the possession, sale, or transportation of less than 8.5 grams of marijuana or possession of certain drug-related paraphernalia while the conviction is more than 2 years old. And so that would put you in not in conflict with that labor code section with that added language.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm getting really confused here on all the conditions. So I wonder if staff could, if we could use Exhibit A of Attachment 6 from the original staff report as the base, and if someone on staff could go through clearly what additional conditions staff is recommending, because I know they're hither and thither in all of this paperwork, but just so that we are all really clear here and out there as to what we're talking about.
Yes, with the permission of the mayor, and I'll fold in what I've just heard the town attorney and Councilman Brzezinski talking about. Again, working off of Exhibit A of Attachment 6, it would be existing condition of approval number 5 pertaining to safety. Item number C would have added at the end, except as permitted under state or federal law. So that would be the only change to 5C. For a new number 10, which is actually an updated and expanded version of what was included in the staff report, it would be pursuant to California Labor Code 432.7 and 432.8, the requirements set forth in 14.130.035E shall not apply to any conviction for the possession, sale, or transportation of less than 28.5 grams of marijuana or possession of certain drug-related paraphernalia where the conviction is more than 2 years old. That would be added as a new condition 2, which supplants the prior staff recommendation that anybody convicted of any marijuana possession would be prohibited from working. Instead, the new language would make that compliant with state labor code, and it would simply be for convictions less than 2 years. And those are the two changes that have been brought forward so far. In addition, staff recommended on page 6 of the staff report some other conditions of approval for council consideration. One of those would be in response to the deadline question that occurred this past year, that staff believes by ordinance was very clear when the deadline was for the application to come in, that condition number 4, permit renewal, be slightly modified to say the permittees shall submit the annual renewal application for the firearms dealer regulatory permit prior to November 1, 2014. And then if the council is so willing to add, any late or incomplete application filed by the permittee shall constitute a violation of Chapter 14.130 and subject the permittee to penalties of X dollars per day until the application has been filed and is deemed complete. And staff believes that would be a maximum of $1,000 per day. So,
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had 2 questions first of, I think, Mr. Schultz. The first is with respect to the indemnity agreement, and it's convenient to me to look at the desk item we got tonight, the second to last page, indemnity/hold harmless provision. Ms. Mammal, in her presentation, indicated that she believed that inclusion of the language that's proposed by the applicant with respect to duress would provide an avenue to invalidate the indemnity agreement. Do you agree or disagree with her statement?
I'm not sure I would agree or disagree. I think it's just easier. I'm not here to negotiate indemnification agreements. I mean, the council has put into the ordinance the indemnification agreement that has to be signed by the applicant, and I see no reason to change that. Any changes in that will water it down. The language proposed by the applicant will water down and create more of a risk on us. Whether he can make an argument in court that would survive and under duress, I can't make that determination. I just don't believe that the town should be negotiating an indemnification agreement. That being said, I do understand the one agreement on his side that doesn't affect us whatsoever, and that's making certain that he preserves his right under the Arms Act, which the Arms Act basically provides him with statutory immunities when someone does purchase a weapon and goes out and harms someone else. So, I mean, it wouldn't affect us whatsoever. It's not anything Satan under duress. It's not trying to water down our indemnification agreement. So that language I'm more susceptible to accept because it doesn't affect our risk whatsoever.
Okay, thank you very much for your very complete answer. My second question is with respect to any condition that the council might want to add to an application or a permit. Is the town council allowed to insert conditions, for example, the proposed condition regarding the marijuana conviction, that go beyond or change the language of the ordinance without amending the ordinance? So clearly we have language indicating that a condition of approval can be put on a permit if it's reasonably related to what's been brought up at the hearing or what's come forward in the application. So my question is, are you comfortable with adding those types of conditions even though they might be different than the current language we have in our ordinance?
Yes, I'm comfortable. You have that discretion.
Thank you. And then I guess I should add my comments because I didn't do that. I think it's absolutely appropriate. I agree with Councilmember Spector that the applicant should execute an indemnity agreement, and as indicated in our ordinance, it's quite clear. So this councilperson would not be prepared to approve a permit which did not contain an indemnity agreement that is in accordance with our town code. With respect to whether the application was late, part of the ordinance, section 14.130.065, paren B, indicates that an applicant shall file an application under this chapter, that's section 14, which is the permitting process, which was clearly distinct from the land use process. So it doesn't strike me that there's a reasonable ambiguity with respect to which one applies in terms of the 60-day limitation on filing. So it says under this chapter within 60 days, calendar days of the effective date. And that was November 4th. Well, I forget the effective date, but 60 days was November 4th. They filed on December 6th, and the explanation is that a manager was in charge or the owner was taking care of family members. While I'm sympathetic to that, given the scrutiny, and I think the scrutiny has been correct, and I don't think it's out of proportion to scrutiny that we give nail salons or restaurants or alcohol permits. They should have been paying attention to the dates. I'm not particularly convinced by the excuse for the late failures, the late filing, so I think a penalty is appropriate. $1,000 a day I think is not particularly reasonable, but a penalty is appropriate that should be discussed by the council. And perhaps that's, in addition to the indemnification language, is something that may unfortunately necessitate a continuance, but I'd like to hear from other members of the council with respect to that. I'm comfortable with the change in our language with respect to the marijuana conviction. As a California state prosecutor, less than an ounce of marijuana is kind of like getting a traffic ticket. So we didn't discuss that at ad hoc committee. I think if that had been pointed out to us, we would not have included it. So making that a different condition, I think, is appropriate. Oh, what else did I have? The broken window concerns me, and the number of inspections concerns me. And it concerns me because sort of an umbrella of bookkeeping, if you will, and as Councilmember Spector said, dotting your I's and crossing your T's. So in this instance, the window has been cracked for a long time. I understand that there's reinforcement, but it doesn't give me a lot of comfort to know that a $5,000 window is cracked. So what else does it take to complete the crack? Mr. Chang's answer didn't give me a lot of confidence that they were waiting to see how things played out before they fixed it. Well, it's clear in our ordinances that there is a requirement that they maintain the proper security, and deciding when you might do that, it's not an option under our ordinance, and that's why we have it in place so that this can be a secure facility. I know that's in Mr. Chang's interest, and it's certainly in the town's interest. In addition, I was concerned, and perhaps I'm different than the California DOJ, but it doesn't strike me that record keeping or errors or giving a gun without proper safety equipment to someone is a minor regulatory problem. That may be just one person's opinion, but how guns go out or how the records are kept is important. That's why we put the inspection language in our permitting process. So it concerns me that those things aren't being done properly. And I hope that Templar and Mr. Chang have put processes in place to correct that. And I am sure that they will if they haven't already. So my inclination is that I don't think it would be appropriate, given the information that we've gotten, to say yes to a permit tonight or say no to a permit tonight. I think we have questions that are out there with respect to the late filing, questions that are out there with respect to the security, questions that are out there with respect to the appropriateness of a penalty, questions with respect to conditions that have kind of come in piecemeal that we're trying to get right here, and questions with respect to the indemnity language. So it may be more appropriate, unfortunately, to continue this so that we can all be on the same page as to what we're actually proposing, what we're looking at. It may be beneficial not only to the town, to its citizens, but also to Templar and Mr. Chang.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I might, through the mayor, go back to staff. I'm going to follow up on Ms. McNutt's questions. It is not my inclination, although it's been requested, it's not my inclination to continue this matter. However, in order not to continue it, some of these pieces of paper that we have up here need to be clarified. And I'm specifically looking at page 6 of our staff report, where staff suggested additional conditions. I understand now what you've suggested be added to attachment 6. So now on page 6, what is it that staff is suggesting be included as conditions should we go forward? The whole thing as it's worded, something else?
Mr. Mayor, if I may respond to Councilwoman Spector, on page 6 of the staff report, we would recommend adding a condition if the council chooses to impose a penalty for the late filed application. So that is number 1, and there has not been council direction provided on that yet. So we'll hold that in abeyance. Item 2 is actually required by the ordinance, and just since it is a condition for denial, staff thought with an abundance of caution, it could be added as a new condition at the end of Exhibit A of Attachment 6. So that, using the numbering we have previously presented to council, would become new condition number 11. So item 2 in the staff report would become new condition 11 on the conditions of approval. Item number 3, we have already dealt with per the prior discussion for a new condition number 10. So that one has been resolved. And then the last one, number 4, has been addressed under condition number 4 in Exhibit A of Attachment 6 by adding the November 1st deadline and whatever penalty the council might want to impose in advance for future late or incomplete applications. That was previously discussed. And in response to Council or Vice Mayor Spector, a new condition 12 could be added based on the testimony that you heard tonight that could require any broken window shall be replaced within 30 days or earlier if required for public safety. And based on the testimony, you have the factual basis to justify adding a condition such as that if the council so chose.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. Following up, the November 1st date you say was added to attachment 6, paragraph 4, condition 4?
Correct. And I read language earlier on the record that I can reread.
All right, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify one thing with our town council, that council, not that spelling, not this spelling. And then I might even actually try a motion here. So you were saying on the indemnification that the one sentence that you were comfortable with was, I believe, the one at the end that they were recommending. Is that the whole paragraph or just the last sentence?
Just the last sentence. I can read that to you if you'd like.
Nothing in the preceding, that portion?
Correct. Nothing in this paragraph shall constitute as a waiver or as an agreement to waive any right the applicants have with respect to constitutionality or statutory preemption of the regulations of firearm sales under the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act.
And to acknowledge that as an add-on to the indemnification, would that be another condition, or would that just be a comment from council?
Let's use that as another condition, that can be added to that section. As condition, what were we at, 13? Would be a condition to add the language related to the Arms Act to the indemnification language.
Okay, so I'm going to try a motion and see where we go with this. And I'm just going to make up some numbers here as a starting point for the discussion. So I will, what is the language here? I will move to issue the regulatory firearms dealer permit with the conditions in the staff report with these additions. On condition number 4, to add the language Mr. Larson read, saying that the next application must be made by November 1st, 2014, and that any lateness would be subject to a $1,000 per day fine going forward. Then in number 5C, again, the language issued by Mr. Larson, except as permitted, blah, blah, blah. We can have the full one if you need that. Adding a condition number 10 regarding the labor code and the marijuana situation. Adding condition number 11, which is taken from number 2 on the staff report, as we talked about just a few minutes ago. Number 12, adding a condition that the broken window must be repaired within 30 days. Adding number 13, the language that Mr. Schultz just referenced on the Arms Act. And then number 15, if this is a condition,
14,
I'm sorry. If this is a condition regarding penalties for the current situation, I'm going to suggest that we do a penalty this time of $100 a day for the lateness, and then it jumps to $1,000 going forward. So that would be the motion as a starting point for discussion.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
I'll second that motion.
And if
Councilmember.
I may clarify just for our note-taking, Mr. Mayor, that's $100 per day for the 32 days that the application was late?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the broken window, which is the clause 12, I do think it's important to reference any broken window shall be replaced within 30 days or earlier if necessary for public safety.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. Clarification on the motion, specifically with the indemnification. As I understand the motion, we are excluding the Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. However, we're doing it with the language contained in a January 20th, 2014 memo on page 2. I'll look to staff rather than the maker of the motion. Is that your understanding?
Yes, exactly. The first paragraph in that memo specifically recites the town code section 1430.025C10. And that language will be the indemnification language. It'll stay just as in your ordinance. And at the end of that, then will be the exception dealing with the Arms Act.
All right, then my concern here is, well, first of all, is it your opinion or perspective and I'm talking to Mr. Schultz now, that if we don't have this paragraph about the Arms Act, that the indemnification that the applicant would be providing us would bar the applicant from pursuing an unlawful arms litigation if it chose to do it?
No, I don't think it would waive his right to still raise that, even if he signed our indemnification language just the way it is. My legal opinion is he wouldn't be giving up his right to use as a defense the Arms Act.
And this might be irrelevant given what you just said, but your proposed paragraph with regard to the Arms Act is broader, I think, than it need be even if we put it in there. We could just say nothing in this paragraph shall be construed as a waiver of applicants' rights under the blah, blah, blah Arms Act.
That would be fine too.
All right, so all of that being said, right now I'm not inclined to support the motion simply because of the fact that I don't want to water down our indemnification provision, even to the extent of this Lawful Arms Act, which I don't believe the applicant needs.
Further discussion, Councilmember Brzezinski. Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you. I would like to just get clarification on language that we could all agree with on this so we could go forward, because I was responding to what I thought our town attorney was recommending. So if we don't need to have that in there, or if it can be a simpler sentence, that's fine with me. What's important for me is that the standard indemnification that our ordinance includes is stayed whole. So maybe we can have some discussion back and forth among all the attorneys up here and come to some conclusion on that.
Councilmember Spector.
It would be my suggestion and also my question of our town attorney. If we look at the ordinance itself, if we look at 14130.025 sub 10, that why not simply use that language as our indemnification language?
If that's what council would like to do, they certainly can. My reasoning for trying to add in the Arms Act language was to provide the applicant with that language to resolve his fears over it. I don't see those same issues. The applicant did. And again, I looked at it from a risk standpoint. Whether it's in there or not, it's not going to harm our indemnification clause whatsoever.
All right, thank you. That having been said, the language that this council person would be comfortable with is the language that's actually in our ordinance.
Councilmember McNutt.
That being said, then I'll amend the motion to, I think I can just remove that whole condition that references the indemnification, because otherwise it just reverts back to what we already have, correct?
And the seconder to the motion agrees.
Councilmember Spector.
With that, I'll support the motion.
I guess that comes to be my turn now that you're all done. I was in support of the idea of a continuance for several reasons. One is I think we had a lot to cover this evening, and there were several members of the public who requested that, as well as the applicant themselves. I think trying to rush through this language, the indemnification language, is a little too hasty to do this evening. However, it sounds like a majority of the council is happy with the latest version of the motion. I looked at the application itself, and to me it seemed like it was incomplete, and the applicant had crossed out our indemnification clause and initialed it. And I mean, that's our law. You know, that's the law that we adopted. And they had plenty of time to figure this out. And I just thought, okay, maybe the time that we had given them was not enough time. Maybe in fairness, we take a second stab at this. But I'm not comfortable myself supporting this motion at this time. I would be more inclined to continue this matter till next week.
As I said earlier, I was looking to a continuance, but that wasn't what I was hoping for. Having heard the motion and the discussion and the assurances from Mr. Schultz with respect to our indemnification agreement, and adding a condition with respect to replacement of the window, and the comments from this council as to the timing of the filing of the application and the inclusion of a penalty, makes me believe that I can be comfortable in supporting it, because I think we have done enough to make sure that the ordinance that we work so hard to put in place is going to get followed. And I think that Mr. Chang has heard the comments from the public and the council, and the public and the council has in turn heard Mr. Kilmer and Mr. Chang, and then each party can go forward as they wish. But I think it's probably makes sense at this point to take an action and then let people decide what that action means for them. And I'm I shouldn't say that. I'm comfortable enough with the motion and what it includes with respect to the indemnification and the penalty for the late filing that I will support it.
Town Attorney?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the applicant did very early on in the process, when he submitted the application and crossed out the indemnification language, contacted my office and wanted to negotiate different language. And I said, I'm not in the position to negotiate that language. That language is specific in your ordinance. You took the time and energy over months to develop that language, and then I did not have the ability to negotiate any other language, but that was in the ordinance, and that he needed to provide language to the council, and that's why you got it in that package, and that's why there wasn't that negotiations that may occur if there wasn't any language that wasn't already proposed.
Follow-up question to your comments. Do we need to have them fill out a new application with an uncrossed out indemnification?
Yes, before obtaining a permit, they would have to have that language, maybe not in an application, but a signed, written indemnity agreement that complies with that section of the code.
Thank you. Further discussion? Town Manager?
In response to that, there is the issue that Councilwoman Spector spoke to earlier. We do have the business license that has to be issued by the end of January, but we have the separate letter to the Department of Justice that would need to be authored and sent, stating that Templar is complying with all local laws and regulations. And it would be my intention, based on the council's action, to not sign and submit such letter till A, the indemnification clause that you have approved has been signed, and second, that the penalty specified by your likely action has been paid. And that creates an enforcement mechanism to make sure everything's done.
Vice Mayor?
Following up on that, Mr. Larson, wouldn't your letter also be delayed if there's a condition that's not followed? So, for example, the window wasn't replaced.
The condition, as I proposed, gave 30 days, and the letter would be due by the end of this month, and so the 30 days goes beyond. If they were to not replace the letter, I think it would probably be incumbent on us to either start an investigation for violation of your ordinance and possible suspension or revocation proceedings as allowed, or to possibly author a new letter to DOJ that we have an issue that needs to be resolved.
Councilmember Spector?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question of staff. I agree with the timing and the conditions of issuing the license. Should that, in order to make everything really clean and complete, be included in our motion?
I don't believe it's necessary to be a condition of approval. Certainly the council always has authority to provide direction to staff. And so if the maker of the motion and seconder and the council majority so agreed, there could be implicit direction to staff to not issue the letter to DOJ until those enforceable parts of the conditions of approval have been implemented.
Well, this one person who is supporting the motion would make that request.
Would the maker of the motion consider that?
That sounds like a good idea.
As does
Seconder.
the seconder.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. None. Councilmember Spector.
I was afraid you're going to gavel us done, so wanted to get in first.
Go ahead.
One of the issues that came up, I think, from the town attorney was that there were other jurisdictions that had the applicant, the firearms dealer, place the jurisdiction, the municipality, as an additional insured on its insurance policy. I think that's a very good idea, and I'm just asking staff how, if other people think it's a good idea, how you would suggest we approach it. Just ask you to amend our ordinance.
Through the amendment of the ordinance, and that might be where we change some of the language related to what came up tonight with the marijuana and the labor code conflicts. So that would be through amendments. We could do that.
Would staff like that in form of a motion, sort of an omnibus motion for all the cleanup stuff?
Yes. I think having implemented the process for the first time, it would be helpful to do that review. And I might even ask the members' indulgence to reconvene the ordinance committee to further that review, which previously consisted of now Vice Mayor Marcia Jensen and the council member Joe Przynski.
Well, then I'm going to start the motion, and then I'm going to look to staff to finish it for me. I'm going to ask staff and the Firearms Ad Hoc Committee to review our ordinance and specifically to add a provision that the town is an additional insured in any firearm dealer's indemnity or insurance policy. Is there anything else you would like?
You said review the ordinance, so I think that gives the opportunity to look at other implementation issues.
All right, then that's my motion.
Vice Mayor.
I'd like to second the motion, and I'd also like to ask the maker of the motion whether you would consider adding to your direction the other conditions of approval that are attachment 5 to our staff report that are in place in the city of Pleasant Hill, where the committee just look at those and see if that's appropriate to amend our ordinance.
Councilmember Spector.
Mr. Mayor, quite frankly, I don't have all of that in my mind right now, but I don't see any problem with having the staff and ad hoc committee look at other issues, so it's fine.
Then I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously. Any other discussion? Seeing none. This meeting is adjourned.